Let me try again. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we've adopted the following process. If you're watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask your name, item number you wish to address, and your phone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you, and it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application, answer any questions that may arise. Maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You'll need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. Maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested party and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with the proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Only applicants, specified persons, and public bodies may appeal decisions in respect of applications for minor variance and consents to the Ontario Land Tribunal. A notice of appeal may not be filed by any other individual person, unincorporated association, or group. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in the hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town, staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. See, we have regrets tonight from Ms. McHale. Members, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none from the committee members. I actually have two tonight. Although my office is out of town, I have two work-related conflicts. CAV A018 at 249 Elton Park Road. The applicant is a relative of my employer, and CAV A023 at 280 Douglas. A work colleague of mine is a budding owner to the applicant. Mr. Hardcastle, when these matters arise tonight, I'll ask you to take the chair. Thank you. Madam Secretary Treasurer, it would appear we have a number of requests tonight for deferrals.
That is correct. And if anybody is looking to request a deferral, if they could just raise their hand and I can move them into the meeting one at a time. Thank you. Okay, I've moved Mr. Galinchenko into the meeting.
Yes, good evening.
Get your name and address and the application you're here for, please.
I am Mikhail Golichenko at 527 Viner Crescent, Oakville, Ontario, L6L3R4. I'm a property owner, and the application number is CAV-A/005/2023.
And you'd like to request a deferral
Yes, I'd like to request a deferral.
because of the staff report and you're looking for an opportunity to work with staff?
That is exactly the reason, and we received the staff report on March 3rd. We are happy to address at least 3 of those issues raised, and I think it was a misunderstanding before we spoke with the staff members several times, and we thought that we came to an agreement. It was actually unexpected for us to receive such lengthy report with all the objections, and we are happy to address them. That's why I requested deferral.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, all those in favor of deferring this application? Okay, that is unanimous. Your application is deferred, and you'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready to come back. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, I've moved Jim Pfeffer into the meeting.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm Jim Pfeffer with Macco Architects at 3 Bridgman Avenue, Toronto, Ontario. And I'm the applicant for 61 Pebble Ridge Place. So that's file A020. And like the prior applicant, we'd like a opportunity to just meet with staff and address some of the concerns that they raised in the reports. I think we are willing to make some changes, definitely to address some of their issues, and we want to have a chance to talk to them to better understand what their concerns are, and hopefully, come to committee again with their support.
Hey, thank you. Committee members, favor of the deferral? Right, it's unanimous. Your application has been deferred, and again, when you're ready to come back, you can see the Secretary Treasurer to get rescheduled.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
I've moved Lindsay Bruce into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Joel Tanner with the Office of Simple Design Studio on Lindsay Bruce's behalf this evening. We are seeking a deferral on file A025221 Wooddale. We do have support from neighboring property owners. However, we do not quite have staff resolutions. So we're looking to work with them on a couple modifications and come back to you hopefully in the coming months.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, all those in favor of deferral? That is unanimous. Your application's been deferred. When you're ready, you can contact Secretary Treasurer.
Thanks, committee. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Okay, I've moved Stephanie Matviva into the meeting.
Good evening, Ms. Matviva.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Stephanie Matviva, Glenchnar and Associates. The address is 10 Cambridge Garden Circle, Mississauga. I'm the agent representing the owners of 1078 Cedar Grove Boulevard. application CAB 013-2023. Sorry, completely slaughtered that. We're requesting a deferral in order to work with staff.
Okay, thank you. And I note that while you do have letters of support, you've also got letters of opposition, so you'll be working with the community as well?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Committee members, all those in favor of the deferral? That is unanimous. Your application has been deferred, and you'll see Secretary Treasurer when you're ready to come back.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, I've moved Chris Stoyanovich into the meeting.
Good evening. If you could unmute yourself and turn your camera on.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I've just been, hold on. I've been sort of taken out of the meeting. Hold on.
Oh, you're in. He was in. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully this is going to work. Mr. Chairman, my name is Chris Stoyanovich. I'm the planning consultant agent for the adjacent landowner at 25 Burkbank Drive, immediately adjacent to the north.
Okay, so, excuse me, so this is for applicants who are wishing to defer their applications at this time?
Oh, sorry, I was requesting a deferral on behalf of my client as part of my written submission on Monday, March 6th. I'm a deputant.
But so this is for applicants who are wishing to defer. If your client's in opposition and the applicant isn't asking to defer, we'll hear you at the time that the hearing on that matter.
I understand, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chalowski, I'm going to remove you from the meeting now, and if Mr. Hardcastle could take over, and then I'll be moving 280 Douglas into the meeting, and then we'll move forward with the Elton Park as well, Mr. Hardcastle, so we'll be able to do the two items with Mr. Chalowski removed. So give me a moment, I'll just remove him from the meeting, and then I'll let you know when it's good to go. Okay, Mr. Chalowski has been removed from the meeting, and I've moved Mr. Sun into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Sun. I understand that you're requesting a deferral for your application. Could I have your name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening. My name is Andrew Sun from Atelier Sun. Address 188 Strong Avenue, Toronto. I'm the agent for 280 Douglas Avenue, file number 023. We are seeking for a deferral because we noticed there's comments and concerns from the planning staff and the neighbors, and we would like to further communicate and address those concerns with the planning staff and the neighbor.
Excellent. All those, thank you, Mr. Sun. All those in support of the deferral request? Your application has been deferred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hardcastle, if you'd like to move forward with the first item on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the deferrals dealt with, I will call the first item on the agenda, which is CAVA 018 of 2023 at 249 Elton Park Drive. Do I have the applicant? Is the applicant here?
Okay, I've moved Mr. Demchuk into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Demchuk. Could I have your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, good evening, members of the committee. Just confirming you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is Paul Demchuk with Victoria Urban Planning. I am the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 249 Elton Park Road this evening. I prepared a very brief presentation just for the benefit of the committee this evening that I'd like to just quickly go through. Next slide, please. So the subject property at 249 Elton Park Road is currently under construction, which was approved with a number of minor variances in September of 2021. These included variances to the height, dwelling depth, floor area ratio, as well as the private garage area at that time. The application before the committee this evening is to permit a proposed covered outdoor patio at the rear of the dwelling, and a single variance is required to the lot coverage before the committee this evening. Next slide, please. The following slide is a site plan of the dwelling that is currently under construction on the property. Again, this is the identical dwelling that was approved by this committee in September of 2021. You can see at the rear of the dwelling was the location at the time of the proposed trellis, which is located in between the rear of the dwelling and between where the cabana and pool are intended to be situated. Then the homeowner is essentially looking to, in lieu of that trellis, replace that trellis with a single-story covered roof in its exact same location. Next slide, please. This is just a comparative elevation of what was approved in 2021 versus what is before the committee this evening in tonight. So essentially, again, as I mentioned, the covered patio is again in an identical location as the previous trellis design, and is architecturally similar, if not identical, at least in terms of its elevation to the previous design. The proposed covered roof in terms of the intent, it's intended to add additional usability, just in terms of inclement weather, to the rear yard by the homeowners. And it's obviously intended to not have any negative impacts in terms of the massing, design, overlook, and privacy of adjacent properties. I would like to highlight, at least from my perspective for the committee, this is actually a pretty good example of where a numerical increase in lot coverage is actually mitigated through the revised design. And the increase in lot coverage, at least again, in my opinion, is imperceivable. So the updated covered roof replaces the trellis, again, in its identical location. And you can see on this elevation that the previously designed fireplace, which was an outdoor fireplace, has been removed from the original design to further mitigate any potential for massing impacts or impacts to any adjacent properties. I would also note that where the site elevation is located, it's adjacent to the property to the north of the site, and there's an existing mature cedar hedge that's located in between the properties in this location, which is being protected and maintained through the current construction and development of my client's property. Next slide, please. So we have read the staff report from Oakville planning staff, which was well written and articulated the issue as well very, very concisely. Just in summary, before the committee, the application, in my opinion, does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. It fits in appropriately with the existing context of the development that was previously approved, as well as the context of the streetscape and the immediate neighborhood. I'm before the committee and would be happy to answer any questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demchak. Are there any questions of committee at this point? I'm not seeing any. I'll ask if there are any members of the public present with respect to this matter who wish to speak to this.
I don't see anybody with their hand raised at this time.
Thank you, Madam Secretary Treasurer. Then I will move. Then I'll open this up for motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as noting that the town's staff report is in support of the application, also having taken into account the presentation made by the applicant's agent this evening, noting that there were no written or oral submissions from the public from a negative perspective. I do want to say that the application before us, I cannot see any negative implications with regards to what it is they are proposing. And I would like to submit that the application be approved as applied for, noting that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And I would like to include the following 2 conditions. First, that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated January 19th, 2023, and elevation drawings dated December 5th, 2022. And our second standard condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. All those in support? Your application has been approved.
Thank you, members. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to move Mr. Chalowski back into the meeting, and I'll let you know when that's complete.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just to catch me up, we're starting now with CAV A019 at 436 Randall Street.
That is correct.
Do we have the applicant? I see Mr. Clamp.
Yes, I've moved Mr. Clamp into the meeting.
Evening, Mr. Clamp.
There we go.
Good evening, sir.
I'm here. Can you hear? There we go. There we go. Good evening, gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is David Clamp. I live at 436 Randall, and I am the applicant, of course, the owner of application file number CAVA 019 2023. I have 3 files. This is the first file, the perspective. Are there any questions, or would you like me to comment?
If you could just take us through your presentation, if there's any questions, they'll come at the end.
Okay, the design, as you see, goes back quite a while. The criteria for the design was that we would build a 1.5-story dwelling to suit my wife and I. This is our retirement home. We've lived in Oakville for 45 years. We wanted the house to look as if it belonged and had a natural feel to it, complementary to the neighborhood. So the view you're seeing is from the corner of Randall and Gloucester, and I think it presents a nice outlook to both perspectives there, street perspectives.
Pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Are any questions on that, gentlemen?
You have additional files to show us, I believe?
Yes, we have another, just 2 more.
Okay.
We'll go to file number 2, which is the site plan. And basically here we oriented the house to be parallel to Gloucester. It gave us a little bit of a better layup on the lot. It's an irregular lot, as you can see. One of my big objectives was to keep the existing mature trees. We have a maple, black walnut, and a chestnut tree that very mature. We want to keep those. Another reason was to move the driveway slightly curved with a compacted gravel driveway. We've used this design on our previous house where we had oak trees immediately next to the driveway, and after 20 years they were still flourishing. So I think this is a good idea there. That's basically all I have to say about the design. You can see the maximum lot coverage has exceeded the 19%. The house is considered a 2-story dwelling. So the maximum lot coverage we're after is 25.97. And then the maximum residential floor area goes up from 42 to 43.8%. So we hope that that minor is considered a minor variance and might be acceptable. The last slide is our floor plans, and really not much I can say about those. It's a modest home. It fits our lifestyle, both now and hopefully we're able to stay there for a long, long time. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
If anyone wants to speak to this application, if you could call in at 905-815-6095, 905-815-6095. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anybody called in to speak to this application?
There's no one at this time.
Okay. If there's nobody calling in, committee members, you've heard the applicant's presentation, a somewhat compatible cottage design in Old Oakville. I'm looking for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report and the drawing materials, as well as the homeowner's excellent presentation, I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval. Having reviewed the materials, I find that the requested variances are, in fact, minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests of the Act. The design of the dwelling is excellent in terms of in terms of addressing any additional massing that comes from the additional RFA and coverage, and we'll mitigate it excellently. So I'll put forward this motion, and the motion will be subject to two conditions. Those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated December 20th, 2022, and the elevation drawings dated December 22nd, 20. I'm assuming there's a typographical error in the date, or were the elevation drawings in fact dated December 22 of 2014?
Originally we developed then, yes, but yeah.
You updated last year.
If you just
So
bear with me.
I updated them last year.
Yeah, but the drawings that we have here on record that were provided to us are dated December 22nd, 2014. So we'll make that first condition in accordance with the elevation date that we have here, December 22nd, 2014, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Thank you. I've noted that.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good night.
Good night. We're moving along to CAV A022 at 460 Copeland Court. Anyone that wishes to speak to this application, you can call in at 905-815-6095. It's 905-815-6095.
Okay, I've moved Mr. Sandhu into the meeting.
I'm going to say Ms. Sandhu.
Yes. Good evening.
I apologize.
No worries. I can't, okay. You guys can see me okay?
Yep. If we can just get your name and address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Parveen Sandhu, and I am the owner of 460 Copeland Court, CAV A022 2023 as my application. There it is. I am here before you today to request one minor variance for minimum front yard setback. Slide 2, please. I was here before you on before the committee as well on February 22nd, 2022. And I had at that time requested one variance for RFA, specifically to increase the residential floor plan from 29% to 31.26%. And thankfully that was approved at that time. And since then we took a bit of a break with our plans, with everything going on in the world. Slide 3, please. We have once again started working on our plans to build, and these are the elevations for our proposed home. Slide 4, please. Our current home that we live in is set very far back on our lot in comparison to the neighboring homes on our street. Our property, outlined in red, as you can see, is further back when you compare it to our neighbors who are set much further forward than ours. As such, we would like to relocate the position of our proposed home by moving it forward and creating a more uniform setback along our street. Slide 5, please. Our lot is an irregular shaped lot, and because of its circular curb, it creates a circular front yard setback. Our minimum front yard setback is 13.27 meters, and I am here to request relief to permit a 12.3 meter setback. By moving the house forward, I want to emphasize that only a portion of the front porch actually requires the relief, while the rest of the house fully complies with the front yard setback and all other setbacks. This request is minor in nature, in my view, and the dwelling will maintain the character of our neighborhood and will not present negative impacts to the other properties or the streetscape. The staff comments also indicated support for my application, and my neighbors know about my request for this variance. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. And we know we do have 3 letters of support on record. Again, if anyone's interested in this application, if you can call 905-815-6095. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? I'm seeing none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, is anyone called in to speak to this application?
There's no one at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as noting that the town staff report is in favor of the application. Also noting that there were 3 letters of support submitted to the committee, noting that there were no negative oral or written comments received. I would like to move a motion finding that the application as applied for is approved, noting that I find that it's minor in nature and does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And I would like to move it with the following 2 conditions. First, that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated November 28th, 2022, and elevation drawings dated December 30th, 2022, and as well as our second condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Mr. Hardcastle, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Great, thank you.
Have
a good night.
Okay, we will now move to CAV 8024 at 15 Burkebank Drive. Anybody that wishes to speak to this application, it's now time to call 905-815-6095. It's 905-815-6095.
If you'd like to join the meeting, can you please raise your hand and I can certainly move you into the meeting?
I see Mr. Huter.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Good evening. To your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, of course. Jason Heater from HDS Well, 20 Gilmore Road in Puslinch on behalf of my clients at 15 Burkebank. We're in front of you this evening seeking 4 variances to the current bylaw. If we could go to page 2, please. These are the 4 variances. I'll just run them in order. Rear yard setback, dwelling depth, main wall proportionality, and then height. Next slide, please. This is a rather unique lot at the end of a cul-de-sac. The lot is lined with trees along all property lines. The front yard facing the street is extremely narrow with tight access. The current dominant feature of the existing home is, in fact, its garage. I'll just note here quickly for the committee's sake, the rear lot line in our discussion this evening is actually the lot line that is adjacent to the empty park block. All others, including the lake, are deemed as side yard lot lines, interior side yards. And then, of course, we have the arcing front yard. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is an existing survey, and I just wanted to quickly note that based on the zoning bylaw of today, the existing house would be non-compliant with its current rear yard setback as well, and its current dwelling depth. Next slide, please. We have slightly rotated and reoriented the house to take advantage of the lakefront width and to try and place as many of the rooms in the direction of the lake and providing water views. In order to do so, we have pushed the home as far back as the conservation limits would allow us, thus using the wider portion of the rear lakefront lot. The orientation, the proposed orientation also provides a very large courtyard buffer to the neighbor to the north at 25 Burkebank. We are providing in excess of 15 meters in setback to the side yard of our current front two-story face. The only element that is closer is the single-story garage feature. If we were to orient the house along the northern property limit, you could, as of right, build a two-story facade 20 meters long, 4.2 meters away from that property line, which would present a much more dominant building elevation and massing to the neighbor to the north. The home occupies a very similar footprint to what is currently on the site. And we feel the proposed orientation will actually provide a nicer building presentation. As you round the cul-de-sac, you'll get a better view of the main elevation of the home. If I could just speak to the rear yard setback variance, 7.62 is the request. That's measured to a single-story open-air covered porch column on the back. The little blue triangle section that you're seeing highlighted in this is the only portion of the dwelling, the two-story portion of the dwelling that is within that setback. As you make your way north on the property, that rear yard setback opens up to 11.22 meters, which complies. I would like to note, again, the rear yard is adjacent to the vacant town park. There are no neighbors in our rear yard. Thus, we feel that the impact of the additional proximity to the rear property line is mitigated based on no neighboring properties. The dwelling depth, we're looking for 28.09 meters. As stated, the rear yard is actually the park block, so the depth of the house is measured along that axis. In order to minimize any perceived impacts of depth, we have provided an extremely large courtyard setback to the neighbor up to the north. The portion of the home that faces this neighbor has also been designed to reduce massing, utilizing single-story roof lines, an articulation of depth in the front facade, and the second floor rooms built within lowered roof planes. Again, we feel it's a far more friendly approach than a 20-meter long two-story wall 4.2 meters away from that property line. The front courtyard will, of course, be beautifully landscaped, and all of the existing perimeter trees along that northern boundary are set to remain. We would also like to speak that that 15 meters also provides a great buffer to mitigate any overlook conditions. It would be rather difficult to look across that depth of a setback into the adjacent property owner's rear yard or side yard, which is the case. The next slide, quickly, if I could. I've just overlaid in blue the current home in respect to its depth on the lot. And you'll actually notice that it's slightly longer in its current orientation than what our house will present. Main wall proportionality, third variance, a really technical variance in its nature. The curving front lot lines and the odd angled westerly side yard create a small pocket of the home that cannot exist within the minimum and maximum front yard setback. So it's a very technical variance in nature. And then with respect to the building height, if I could get the next slide. Again, this is a large lakefront home. There are larger homes adjacent on all sides. The variance being requested is only for this small little red highlighted portion of the home. It's central to the main mass of the home, and the remainder of the home will comply to the 9-meter requirement. We also have a 0.8 meter grade difference to our average grade, which makes up almost the entirety of the additional variance request. Again, the home has been broken up with several single-story roof lines and second floor built within dormered roof spaces to mitigate any perceived impacts of height on adjacent dwellings. And again, we feel that the courtyard setback to the northern property line helps further mitigate any perceived height. Just in closing, I did want to note that as a right of practice within my firm, I hand-delivered letters explaining the proposal as well as a package of drawings to all neighbors within the circulation limits on Burkebank and on Arkendo as well on the backside. I did so when I posted the sign on February 22nd. I do that just to try and draw out any comments or concerns, and I had not been contacted by anyone as of today. I do believe the variances are minor in nature. There is no cumulative effect with the requested variances, and I think the home will fit in beautifully within the neighbor and within the neighborhood context. Any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions? Mr. Heater? Mr. Heater, I'll raise, staff have indicated that you may have missed a variance.
Yes, we do understand. We do have options to address that appropriately, and it does not impact any of the current variances in front of you.
The staircase in question is shown on the site plan, I believe.
It is, yeah. And I guess in the worst case scenario, we would be back, but we are in discussions with zoning and planning. This has to do with the lake being deemed a side yard in this case and not a rear yard. So.
Okay, so no other questions from the committee members. I believe Mr. Heater, you have some opposition. Who was here earlier, who I assume will be coming back now, Ms. Secretary Treasurer.
Yes, he's been moved back into the meeting.
Good evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Oh, I've just lost you again. Hold on. What happened here?
We can still see and hear you.
Oh, there I am. Okay. Well, to reintroduce myself, Chris Stoyanovich, planning consultant and agent for the owner, Mr. Mao of 25 Burkebank Drive, the home immediately adjacent to the north of 15. I guess at the outset, just to help the chairman and the committee members understand my client's concerns, I look at the design drawings prepared by Jason's firm and I see a front elevation, a north elevation, that instead of facing the street, which is very typical of existing residential properties in this neighborhood, almost universally. It's also a policy and part of Oakville's criteria with respect to residential developments facing the street, not facing a side yard, which is what this proposed application does. So by facing the north elevation in 25 Birkdale, what the applicant has suggested that they were able to do was, of course, take advantage of a backyard to the house that's going to face the lake. So it's to the advantage of the owner of 15 to create this elevation and this siting and orientation of this building, which to me, despite what planning staff have said, runs counter to city official plan policies and the livable Oakville design guidelines for stable residential communities, which is posted on the town's Committee of Adjustment website. So we have an atypical siting of this building that's going to create concerns for my client from the standpoint of privacy issues, the overlook to a two-story house that he's owned since 2012. I went into that house. You can look across and you'll see where this beautiful home designed by the applicant's firm will be situated. Even though it's set back, it'll be 2 stories. It'll face the side elevation, bedrooms. It'll face the rear yard, the patio, and the backyard. There's a complete loss of privacy, in my opinion. Because they've done that, and because the building is orientated the way it is, then you have minor variances. One, and I'll just ignore the variance for the height, which amounts to about 2 feet. The other variances, minimum rear yard. If you actually calculate what the percentage of the variance is as a result of this design, it's 27.4% beyond what the requirement is. The orientation of the house from east to west creates a building depth of 20, and this is variance 2, a dwelling depth of 28.09 meters, approximately 92 feet. The required is 20. That represents a variance of 40.45%. Item 3, which really speaks to the city's, or the town of Oakville, excuse me, policy and goals with respect to orientating the main facade, the front facade of a building. The minimum 50%, they're requesting a reduction to 40.15%, which is a variance of 19.7%. All of this adds up to an application that I think, in my opinion, runs counter to town of Oakville policies, is going to injure and affect my client adversely in terms of privacy. As a result of the scale of these variances, I've indicated in my letter to the Committee of Adjustment that, in my opinion, they do not meet the 4 tests, that even though I appreciate the applicants advising my client 20 days ago with respect to this application, I was just brought on about a week and a half ago. And there's a lot of water under the bridge with respect to the applicant's application. But my request of the committee as well is to give us an opportunity to sit down with the applicant and the building owner and try to work something out that's going to be more beneficial to my client. And quite frankly, in my opinion, address the town's policies with respect to how this building should be orientated towards Burbank Drive and Carrington, which is a street that runs off of the cul-de-sac or the curved roadway further west. That's in essence my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Towalski, Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for you. In your presentation, you provided a lot of percentage differences on the variances, 27% rear yard, 40% depth, 19% on the frontage facing portion of the building. But as you're aware, minor is not necessarily a mathematical equation. So can you expand on how like these variances are going to impact on your client, other than just that they're a large number?
Yeah, I understand that committee of adjustment decisions are not mathematical determinations. I clearly understand that, and I've been before committees before, both for and against development, so I understand that. The scale of these variances, though, will facilitate what I've described as a building orientation, front door facing north, not to Carrington Place, presenting a front facade that is atypical to the rest of the neighborhood. And never mind the rest of the neighborhood, probably 80% or 90% of the residential Oakville. And current town of Oakville policies, which if I was bringing an application before the town of Oakville Planning Department would ask, where's the front entrance? Why isn't it orientated towards the street? So I'm saying that this application runs counter to that. As a result of running counter to that, the applicant has had to, has designed a building which is which needs these variances and the scale of these variances to make it possible. So that's what I object to. And again, in my professional opinion, I don't believe that this application meets the test, official plan zoning, or the scale of the variance, and it doesn't represent, in my opinion, appropriate development.
Thank you.
Sorry for the long answer, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's perfectly all right. Committee members, any questions for the neighbors?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at how the building is sited on the lot, and I'm looking at how the neighbor of who Mr. Stoyanovich is representing, and how their house is located on their lot. And I'm looking at how the applicant's application with regards to building the building and asking for the variance with regards to the rear lot line. And I kind of, I don't know how to say this, but with regards to, if we were in town, we would be putting up on the slides what it is that I'm looking at to show that these two variances are moving the building to the rear lot line, which is to the park. And in my opinion, as you move that building to the rear lot line, that is having a negative impact on the neighbor to the north based on, you know, what their issues are with regards to how their house is sited. You know, Mr. Stoyanovich has mentioned privacy and having the door facing, you know, the street line. And I think that there's those two variances. Give me one sec. Sorry, I just gotta, this is the joys of doing this from where we are. With regards to the dwelling type,
Mr. Flemington, if I can just interrupt you for a second, I was wondering whether staff can put the site plan back up on the screen. That might help.
Thank you. Yeah, so unfortunately, the site plan does not show the building to the north. But on the application, we can see where the building is sited to the north. In any event, what I'm saying is in my opinion, I think that the dwelling depth and like the variance number 2 and number 3, I think are having a negative impact on the neighbor to the north, in my opinion. That's all I'm saying. So I wish I was there to kind of illustrate, but unfortunately this plan that is there does not show what it is that I'm looking to support, in my opinion, what that neighbor to the north's agent is representing. So in other words, I agree with the comments that the neighbor or agent to the north is saying. I don't agree with the staff report with regards to the dwelling depth and the main wall.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Mr. Hardcastle, any questions for the neighbor's agent? Okay, before I turn it over to Mr. Heater to reply, Mr. Hassan, just the agent has indicated that in his belief, the application is contrary to the town's urban design guidelines. Just wondering if you'd like to comment on that comment from the neighbor, given your staff report would indicate otherwise.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just testing that you can hear me.
Yes.
Unfortunately, my audio cut out just as you said that the question started. So if you could just repeat the question, please. Sorry.
Certainly. It's a night of technical difficulties. The agent for the neighbor has indicated that in his opinion, the staff report is incorrect and that the orientation design of the dwelling is contrary to the town's urban design guidelines. And just wondering if you would like to comment on that, given you have taken the contrary view.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of looking at the orientation of the lot and the configuration of the actual dwelling on the site, staff were of the opinion that the impacts were mitigated with the projecting single-story garage that creates additional separation distance from the neighbor to the north. Further to that, we took a look at the westerly elevation that contains elements that you would find in a front facade, being a front porch and the garage features. So in terms of the permitted as of right permissions, I believe the agent had said and staff considered if the dwelling was reoriented to the side and pushed closer to the northerly lot line, which is the interior lot line, that would be permitted to be 4.2 meters off the lot line. And based on the location of windows along what is currently the rear elevation, we found that to be more impactful than what is currently proposed. So based on the application before us, we found that there had been mitigating circumstances based on the design and proposal to forego any impacts on the abutting properties.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Hassan? Okay, Mr. Teeter, I'll give you an opportunity now to respond to comments made by your neighbor's agent.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, committee members. The agent for our northerly neighbor, he spoke about, having an elevation that is beautifully designed facing a side yard is atypical. I would speak that this lot in its configuration and access to this lot is atypical. So it takes a slightly atypical approach in the design of this home. And as Mr. Hassan has mentioned as well, I would argue that north, south, east, west elevations of these home, any of those elevations of their home would be suitable as street front elevations. So I don't necessarily agree that we are presenting, just because the front door faces a side yard that is 15 meters away from it, that is necessarily atypical. The rotation and orientation of the house as well opens up that front door. I'm not going to necessarily call it the front facade, but the front door a little further to the cul-de-sac as well. And I just think the orientation of a building that if you were to drag this up 4.2 meters away, fill it with the allowable permitted windows, because there would have to be bedrooms on that side, I think we are creating a much worse building facade against that neighboring dwelling, and a much worse overlook condition than what this layout of the home helps to mitigate in opening up that courtyard and presenting a single-story low garage against that property line. Yeah, and again, I would argue again with respect to the rear yard, the current home on the lot stretches past that rear yard setback and its dwelling depth as well. So the natural orientation of a home on this property is to stretch it towards that vacant park lot. So I just feel that we have presented elevations, regardless of what orientation or facade, that would all be suitable as street front elevations, including the west that does face Burkebank with its covered porch and beautiful window design and stairway window design. I think those would be wonderful elements on any streetscape. And I think the concerns of massing and overlook and privacy are mitigated by providing 15 meters to the property line, plus an additional 4 meters of setback, so 19 meters from wall to wall.
Thank you, Mr. Heater. Committee members, any follow-up questions, Mr. Heater? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, just before I close discussion, I just want to check that nobody else has called in to speak to this application.
Okay, I see no one else with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to close discussion and look for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a challenging application. Well, I see, there's a couple of pieces that I think that are worth highlighting for the record. One is this is a uniquely shaped and oriented lot that requires some unique solutions in order to provide a viable and reasonable home on it. Orientation towards the street is one of the challenges that this has. And to that end, I think that efforts have been undertaken in the design of this building to mitigate the potential impacts to the northerly abutting property. As Mr. Heater indicated, the extensive setback, the inclusion of the garage and so-called courtyard area provide for mitigation, particularly in terms of overlook on the ground floor windows. And some of the design elements and building interior building floor plate provide for some comfort, at least in my mind, in terms of the ability or the types of spaces that would be used on the upper level that might not benefit from that same built form interruption provided by the garage space, with the main windows being to an open below space, an ensuite bathroom and a laundry room, and a second ensuite bathroom. Really, those are not necessarily primary living spaces that you would see, and it's not uncommon in interior side yards to have window spaces that overlook. Well, I do agree with some of the comments of my colleague, Mr. Flemington, with respect to the variances for depth, and in my viewpoint, the yard setback, contributing to the building being in the rear yard or more aligned with the rear yard of the property to the north, I do think that the mitigating measures are significant and work to mitigate those impacts. On that basis, I will be putting forward a motion of approval of the application, finding that the minor variances are minor in nature and do conform to the four tests of the Planning Act. I will put forward this motion subject to two standard conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan revision number 2, dated January 10th, 2023, and elevation drawings revision number 1 with the same date, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on this motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, given what my earlier comments are with regards to variants 1 and 2, I'm not prepared to support the motion based on what my earlier comments were stated. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. I will add that, like Mr. Hardcastle, it is a difficult situation. It is a unique situation. We often hear applicants say, "But I could do this and it would be worse." But you know, they're asking for something different, so that in itself is not an acceptable rationale. But when I look at this and I look at the fact that the 28-meter depth is largely an existing situation, and I listened to Mr. Heater's presentation, I'm of the opinion that this solution is a less impactful solution to what would occur on the site if we were to turn this down and the applicant basically rotated the house and alongside going the other way and brought it right up to the minimum setback, would have a greater impact to the neighbor to the north. So, with that, I am inclined to support Mr. Hardcastle's motion. I will close discussion. All those in favor of the motion to approve? All those opposed? Mr. Flemington is opposed. Your application is approved on a 2-to-1 vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good evening. We'll now move to our final application of the night, CAV A026 at 16 Arkendo Drive. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, if you can please call 905-815-6095. Again, 905-815-6095.
And if anybody wishing to attend can please raise their hand and I can move them into the meeting. Okay, I've moved Mr. Outred into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Outwood.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, members. For the record, my name is Bill Outred. Address is 2140 Winston Park Drive, unit number 26, Oakville, Ontario.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just want to proceed forward with an application tonight for a house addition at 16 Arkendo Drive. This is an application that originally we had submitted for site plan approval. And of course, with the recent bill from the province, we were able to withdraw that site plan approval, but we're now proceeding with the committee adjustment application. And we were hoping to have staff support for this particular application, since we're only asking for one variance But obviously the staff are not supporting the one variance. But as I said, typically I'm happy to work with staff to see if we can come up with a solution. But I think with this particular item, it's relatively minor. And as a result, I'd like to proceed tonight. We can go to the second slide, please. This is a street that's adjacent to Lake Ontario. The red dot is where the actual house is adjacent to the lake. Zoning's RL3 O. Once again, lakefront property. The street is all two-story homes of different character and size. I believe all the homes were built likely in the 1970s in that era. We were trying to do a sort of analysis of what the RFA typically is for these homes to see if they're compatible. It's really difficult to do, of course. All I could figure out is that I do know that there's a number of the homes that are legal non-conforming as far as the RFA. And of course, what we're applying for tonight is a residential floor area variance. We're asking for 51.2% or 285.43 meters squared, whereas the bylaw has a maximum of 43% or 239.72. So we're approximately just under 500 square feet over what the permitted RFA is. We go to the next slide, please. Planning has indicated in their comments their objection to our proposal in that they feel it's not compatible in light of the character of the street. I feel just the opposite. As I noted before, every house on the street is two-story. There are, as planning noted, 7 homes that are similar to our client's home as they exist, with the second floor roof having a slope and then having the second floor approximately 20 feet from the front edge of the home. But the majority of the homes are a full two-story. And the reason I put this slide up is just to show you a variation of the different homes on the street that I would have to say at least 60 to 70% of them have a full two-story facade. There's a lot of projection garages on the street, but they do typically have a full facade coming from the first floor through to the second floor. Our 16 Arkendo is down in the lower right-hand corner. You can see that, as far as I'm concerned, it is relatively compatible with the general flavor and character of the existing front elevations on the street. And just as a note, once again, we are only asking for one variance. The proposal is basically just adding about 600 square foot to the second floor. Once again, the variance is only just less than 500 square feet, what we're asking for. But there is no height variance. We're under 9 meters in height. Side yards comply. The front yard is non-conforming, but so are many of the homes on the street. We do not need a variance for it. There's no other variances. Coverage is fine. No other variances we're requesting. So just the RFA. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as I noted, the expansion of the second floor basically is where it's shown on this slide in green. So the blue is basically the existing roof. The green is the addition that's being added to the second story. There's no changes to the building footprint, the coverage, the driveway, everything else remains the same. It's just basically adding that additional green area to the second story. Once again, the height is compatible with the neighborhood. Looks like all the homes are compatible in height. We have, or the architect has, tried to provide that undulation in the middle part of the home to break up the massing a little bit, as well as the roof line break. Once again, providing an undulation to give it a little less massing. But in general, it's generally just a full addition for the second floor to facilitate, I know it's not a planning argument, but to facilitate a family that has 4 kids, essentially. Can I go to the next slide, please? This is a streetscape with the pictures below of the very adjacent homes right and left. So you can see that, both houses are pretty well the same scale as what we're proposing as far as the addition's concerned. You can see in the middle picture, the roof line. Once again, that is similar to about 6 other homes on the street where the roof line goes back about 20 feet and then the second floor portion comes up. You can see on the streetscape, how the scale would be affected in comparison to the two homes on the street. Furthermore, there's a very mature tree right in the front yard that also helps break up any massing issues. The next slide, please. Just as a comparison for other applications, 51 Arkendo had a very similar application approved back in 2016, 51.4% versus 43%. It had a variation of a number of other variances as well at the same time. The only other two variances on the street that have been approved are 56 Arkendo and 14 Arkendo, which are variances that are less than what we're proposing. Those are the only applications that I could find that basically are for variances pertaining to RFA. It doesn't look to me like there's a lot of homes that have been renovated or have had additions added. It looks like it's a lot of the homes are just the existing stock that existed back when the construction occurred in the 1970s. There's a couple of small additions, it looks like, but as I said, not a lot of homes have changed as far as the design. So there hasn't been a lot of applications on the street is what I'm getting at. The next slide, please. So just in summary, very briefly, as I noted, there has been similar variances approved, one in particular on Arkendo. With the design, as I said, all we're trying to do is bring out the second floor, keep within the existing context of the coverage, the massing of the home. The height does not change whatsoever. It's still the same height as what is existing. Just we're trying to get the additional floor area at the front of the house to facilitate, the growing family for our client in this instance. So we feel the variances, or the variance in this case, it's relatively minor. As I said, we're not varying the mass or the size of the home. We're asking for anything further than just the RFA. I do believe the renovated dwelling in this instance would basically be compatible with the existing builds on the street. I don't feel it has any negative impact. The massing would have any negative impact on the other homes in the street. Furthermore, you'll note, I believe that there's no one in opposition to this home. The one neighbor provided a quick note of support. My clients, I should say, mentioned that they had discussions with a few of the neighbors. To their knowledge, there was no discussion of any opposition or any problems. So all we're dealing today with our application is just the fact that the planning department disagrees with my comments and with the design and feels that the second floor in this instance is incompatible. Once again, just last thing I'll say is I feel certainly with the other two-story homes on the street, as you saw from that second slide, I feel this addition is entirely compatible with what exists on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Outred. Maybe I'll start. When you had the drawing up of all the different houses on the street, two things struck me as very inconsistent with your proposal from the rest of the street. First being your proposal appears to be the only one that has full two-story heights without either having the ground floor projecting outward in some parts or the second floor being pushed back. And secondly, it would appear to be the only house that has a high-pitched, truncated flat roof. And like staff, I'm failing to see how that's compatible with the neighborhood. I'm not concerned so much about the size of the variance, but it seems to be the way you're implementing it is causing the incompatibility that staff have identified.
Okay, I mean, if I could just comment to that, there are things, as far as the design is concerned, it is a bit of a change. Massing scale wise, I don't think it is any change as far as what I'm concerned about, but it is one of the few homes that I believe does have that the roof as you described it, as opposed to just a regular pitch roof. When we first looked and dealt with the architect on this, he was asking for height variance. We told him absolutely no way would he be able to get a height variance approved for this particular site. So we brought down the height. I think there was going to potentially be a coverage variance as well. That was changed just with the narrowing down on the size of the addition. But, you know, if there's variations of different elevations on the street, nothing matches what we're proposing necessarily. But I still feel that it's relatively within the character. It's not adding additional massing necessarily. There is the undulation of the front door and the middle portion of the second windows that pushes in about 5 to 6 feet on the front elevation. But as he said, everything on the street looks like it's variable. It's not necessarily going to be sticking out like a sore thumb, in my opinion. It should fit in.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just again, I understand there's no height variance. I understand that there are other buildings that are 2 stories and that you're pushing it out forward. I also recognize that there is one letter in support from one of the neighbors. And I know you were just commenting on it a bit there. I just, like, with regards to the massing of the building, can you just explain like how you've tried to accommodate that so that the viewpoint would be that it's not a negative impact on the neighbors, just from a massing perspective? I thought I heard you say a couple of things there.
Yeah, I did mention, I'm not the architect, just the planning consultant for this particular application, but I did note that the center portion of the home there is a setback of about 5 feet, both first and second floor, to try and give it the illusion of reducing the massing by having 2 focal points and reducing the massing of the center of the home. As he said, it's not a big home, so we can't like do a whole host of variations of things, or the architect can't do a host of variations in this instance. But I do believe that with the way it's designed and the fact that as I said, the remaining homes adjacent to it are relatively, to a certain extent, similar. Look at the one at 546 Arkendo, for instance, that I put on the page 251 Arkendo. I mean, most of these homes are 2-story elements that come up from the ground floor. So once again, we are more or less trying to, or the architect is trying to be compatible with the general look on the street. I don't think this is any different, in my opinion.
Just as a follow-up, what is the need for the applicant in order to have this additional, the variance for this additional space?
We sometimes bring this up that they have, a large family. In this instance, they actually do have 4 small kids. So they obviously want to have 5 bedrooms within the home. So they're trying to have 4 upstairs and one in the basement, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardcastle, any questions? None. Anyone wishing to speak to this application? Hopefully he's already called in at 905-815-6095. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in?
Well, if there's anybody who'd like to speak to this application, they would have to raise their hand and then I can move them into the meeting. I see no one at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close discussion and looking for a motion.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion in support of the application as applied for. I do find that it is minor in nature. I do find that there are no negative impacts on the neighborhood. I do find that it is keeping in development with what is happening in the neighborhood. I know that there are times when neighborhoods are in transition. I think that this is a site where they are just increasing the second floor in a manner to accommodate the needs of the family that own the site. I think in addition, we do have one letter of support for the application. I have heard no oral objections to this application at the presentation this evening. I've received no written negative letters opposing the application. So I would like to support this motion based on that basis. Unfortunately, I don't have the plans in front of me to comment on the conditions as far as what they are. So, and that's a technical issue that I have. Sorry. Unless I could say in keeping with the plans submitted to
the committee dated December 2021. I don't have a revision date. Oh, sorry. July 9th, 2002.
I'd have to defer to town staff to provide that. So, because I don't know what was submitted.
Yeah, there's varying dates. It looks like site plan dated December 21, December 2021. No, and elevations are dated 07, 09, 02. 02, 19, 21. Yeah, I like the make it consistent with site plan and elevation submitted with the application.
Yeah.
Various dates.
Right. And for the record, I mean, I know that I just feel that this is something that I would like to support, finding that it's based on my previous comments.
And you'd make it also subject to a building permit issuing within 2 years?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Mr. Hardcastle, discussion on the motion?
Can I just confirm the condition? Okay, that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the site plan and elevation drawings submitted with the application.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been worrying over this one a little bit. As well, there are a number of homes in the area that are full two-story, and there are even at least 3 sites that have seen a similar type or scale of variance come in. I've struggled with the architectural design of this building and the efforts that it has undertaken, or the impact on that on the massing of the building, relative to that within the existing area. But the comments that I've heard from Mr. Oakville and those that I've heard from Mr. Flemington have brought me around to a position that I will support the motion that's on the floor. I do think that the impact of this will be relatively minor, and so I'll support the motion that's on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. I'm going to take a contrary view. I don't believe that the way this house has been designed, that it represents appropriate development. I don't believe the applicant has made any attempt to mitigate the impact of the massing. So I myself agree with staff's view on this, but With that said, the motion on the floor is to approve. All those in favor? And all those opposed? That's approved on a 2-to-1 vote. Your application is approved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
You have a good evening. Well, that concludes the applications for tonight. We have minutes from February 22nd. I get a mover. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. And can I get a movement to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle, at 8:51.